Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the NoSilicast podcast, hosted at podfeet.com, a technology geek podcast with an ever-so-slight Apple bias. Today is Sunday, December 15th, 2024, and this is show number 1023. Before we get started, I want to tell you there will not be a live show next week because our kids are going to be here on Sunday, so I'll be publishing the show early on Saturday the 21st. Now, we will have a live show on the 29th of December, if anybody's interested, but Steve and I will be in Vegas for CES on the following Sunday, which is the 5th of January, so there'll be no live show that day either. So I'll remind you of that on the 29th, but the main thing to remember is next week, no live show, but the following week there will be. So we will be back on the 29th. All right, everybody with me? Let's get going. Well, when the developer of iThoughts decided to shutter the doors on his business, I chose MindNode as my new mind mapping tool of choice. My post in April entitled RIP iThoughts is probably in my top 10 most commented articles. A lot of people jumped into the discussion just to say thanks for the trade study I did where I picked out the tool I was going to use, while others joined in to offer alternative solutions. It's really been great having a group of people to share a common topic of interest. Well, here we are 9 months later, and big changes are coming to MindNode. I'm not ready to call the changes a success, but I'm really intrigued by the path the company has taken. Imagine you rewrite your flagship product from the ground up, and it's working great, but it's not yet in full feature parity with the previous version. What do? You got a couple of choices. One path would be to sit tight and just keep working your little coding fingers to the bone until 100% of the features in the old product are now available in the new. Or you could go down kind of a risky path where you release the new version, missing some features, and have it exist almost kind of side by side with the original. That second path is what the folks at MindNode have chosen to do. I think it's a path with a lot of merit, but it could cause people who don't understand what's going on to abandon the new software or, leave bad reviews for it. My goal is to explain what they're doing, and then with knowledge, you can decide if you think they're on the right path. First, let's understand the naming conventions. The original MindNode has been rebranded as MindNode Classic, and the new hotness is called MindNode Next. I think it's going to be pretty easy to keep those names straight. They did a good job there. For the time being, the only version you can get through SetApp is MindNode Classic. They believe they'll probably replace it with MindNode Next eventually, but they have to figure out how to make that transition. In the iOS App Store and the Mac App Store, the only option you'll see is MindNode Next. But don't panic, it's not gone. It's just unlisted. I put a link in the show notes where you'll find direct links to MindNode Classic in both the Mac App Store and the iOS App Store. Now here's an even more interesting tidbit. They're still developing MindNode Classic and adding features. I'm sure new development will slow down as the two versions converge, but it gives me a good feeling about their dedication to a smooth transition. Turns out you can run both apps side by side right now and for the foreseeable future. I'm sure at some point they'll sunset MindNode Classic, but it's not going to be anytime soon. If you want to keep up to date on the development of both products, you can go to mindnode.com/releases. When you look at the release page, you need a magic decoder ring, which I've suggested they should put on the page. If you see a feature that says 2024.x, that means it's a feature they've added to MindNode Next. If it says 2023.x, that means it's a feature for MindNode Classic. I got to tell you, I've been surprised at how often I see updates on this release notes page. One more naming convention. You can use MindNode Classic and MindNode Next without paying a single hooniacker for it. You get a limited feature set, but it might be everything you need. If you want a full feature set, you can subscribe to MindNode Plus for both versions for $25 a year or $3 a month. If you want to compare features between free and plus, you can go to mindnode.com/download, and of course, there's a link in the show notes to that as well. Now let's finally talk about MindNode Next. I'm not going to give you any kind of a deep dive on the product until I have time to really dig into the app, and I'll probably wait to do that until it's more feature parity with MindNode Classic. I keep talking about the lack of features, but I haven't explained what's missing. The MindNode folks have created a great page where they document, using a mind map, what features are in MindNode Classic and how they're progressing on shipping those features. Now let's talk about some of the new features and talk about what's missing. One of the biggest changes in MindNode Next is that it's no longer document-based. Rather, your documents are managed directly in the app and stored in iCloud. If you feel strongly about the ability to see your documents in Finder, this will not be a welcome change. The main reason I care about an app being document-based is to ensure portability of my data. If the import and export options are solid, I think I can live with it. I'd still prefer it be document-based, but like I said, I think I can live with it. I can say that in my limited first use of the app, iCloud syncing works really well. Changes on one device were visible nearly instantaneously on my other devices. With iThoughts being document-based, I was constantly finding conflicted versions of a mind map. So I'd have one version, then the same I'd have one file and then the same file name and it would say conflicted. And I had no way to tell which one was the right one. And there was no way to tell what was different between the two. So maybe this is a good change to have iCloud syncing instead. In the currently shipping version of MindNode Next, you can only import MindNode Classic files, plain text files, and Markdown files. On the planned section of the roadmap, you will be able to import OPML, RTF, text bundle, text pack, FreeMind, SMind, MindJet Mind Manager, and my beloved iThoughts. I breathed a sigh of relief when I read that, as import of iThoughts was one of my top criteria. Now, remember how I said I thought it was risky to come out with a new app when it wasn't quite baked? I suspect many people will declare MindNode Next hot garbage due to its limited file import capabilities. I'm specifically trying to calm people down because I personally panicked when I saw I couldn't import iThoughts, and I immediately posted, I'm going to go look for a new mind mapping application. Don't be like me. Give them a minute to get more features implemented. Now, I said you can import plain text, Markdown, and MindNode Classic files, but in MindNode Next, you'll be baffled as to how to accomplish that feat. You're not going to find file open or file import, no option like that in the menu bar. I wrote to my contact at MindNode and they said, oh, you have to start from the Finder. Select a file you want to import, right-click, choose Open With, and then choose MindNode Next. Okay, you need to tell us that though, right? Now, you can also drag the file onto the MindNode Next icon if you keep it in the dock. I suggested perhaps a little hint about that in the app might reduce confusion and keep a few haters calmed down. Now, export's a lot easier. There's an obvious Sharo where you can export to MindNode Classic file, PDF, SVG, image, Markdown, or text. Now, SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphic, which means these images can be resized without losing any quality. And that's super cool for a mind map, especially, say, a giant complex one like the time I mapped all the iOS settings in what Donald Burr calls my mind map of doom. One of the problems I have with that is that I can't show it to anybody because if you had it printed out, I think I calculated it was printed on 8.5 by 11 sideways landscape, it would be like 6 feet tall. So having it in SVG would mean you could zoom in and out anytime you want. So it's really cool that they do have that as export. Now, one of the biggest new features of MindNode Next is you'll be able to collaborate with others. I haven't been able to test this with anyone yet. If anybody out there is running MindNode and willing to take a look at MindNode Next, I'd really love it if you could let me know. Maybe we can just have a little play date where we do comparing notes on trying to collaborate and see how it works. I wouldn't probably let anybody play with most of the mind maps I do, but I could see it as a great way to brainstorm with someone on a topic since you're supposed to be able to see these changes real time. Now, with MindNode Classic, they use a right sidebar to change things like fonts and the color or shape of a node. You can still do that with MindNode Next, but they've added a new inline inspector that's, I love this thing. It pops up whenever you select a node. In addition to the styling options, the inline inspector includes a fold button, so you can quickly fold and unfold nodes beneath the currently selected node. Now, wait, there's more. According to the page where they document new features in each release, they say you can use Apple Image Playground to create images based on your node's content. They also say you can ask Siri about the content of your document and let Apple Intelligence summarize it. I haven't figured out how to do any of that yet, but remember, this is not a review of MindNode Next. The bottom line is that I'm going to give the folks at MindNode a chance to succeed with this new version. I'll wait to judge MindNode Next until it's at feature parity with MindNode Classic. Over the upcoming months, I'll be using MindNode Next in anger, as the Europeans say, putting it through its paces with my real work with mind maps, so stay tuned for a future review. I hope you keep an open mind about MindNode Next and give them some space to make it even better than MindNode Classic. You've probably noticed by now that I've created quite a few Tiny Mac Tips posts over the last couple of years with the goal of helping people move from adequate users of the Mac to power users. I just ran a count and there are 53 tips posted so far, and I have even more in the queue. Now, as I finished Tiny Mac Tips 9 a few weeks ago and gave a second presentation to a Mac user group on some of the tips, I realized that improvements could be made to help people more easily navigate this body of work. Even when I wanted to find a tip myself, I had to refer back to my own Notion database of the tips to figure out which tip number had that particular Tiny Mac tip. Now, how on earth could consumers of this content ever find the one they remembered hearing about? What if you wanted to send someone to my site for all of the Tiny Mac tips? How would you do that? Before I explain the improvements, let's look at the evolution of the posts. I created the first Tiny Mac Tips post, not realizing this would take on a life of its own. It was pretty simple to navigate, with each heading being a new tip. But after I had a few more posts published, I thought maybe it would be handy to be able to jump between the posts. They're often separated in time of publishing by months, so without some assistance, it would be, kind of hard to find them all. I decided to create links in the post to help you navigate. At the end of Tiny Mac Tips 1, I added a link to Tiny Mac Tips 2. In Tiny Mac Tips 2, up at the top, I put a link back to Tiny Mac Tips 1. Now, that sounds silly when you only talk about 2 posts and they're self-referential, but now, no matter what Tiny Mac Tips post you're on, there are links to all of the previous posts at the top and a link at the bottom to the next one. That certainly helped. But then I got to thinking, what if you wanted to see all of the tips posted at once without opening every single one in a separate tab? To solve this, I created a category in WordPress called Tiny-Mac-Tips, and I assigned all of the Tiny Mac Tips posts to that category. Once a category exists, it's possible to navigate to a page that contains all posts in that category. This is how the blog posts and security bits and even the podcast pages exist. There's simply every item in one of those pages just has that category as its name, and that's how it ends up on that page. This also explains why you can see security bits on the security bits page and on the blog post page. I put them in both categories. It also explains why sometimes you can't find the most recent security bits post, because sometimes I forget to check the box that adds it to the security bits category. Usually somebody tells me that I forgot to do it, and I put it in there, and it's okay by the time you see it. I created the red buttons on the podfeed.com homepage so that you have an easy way to see these category-created pages. If I didn't, you'd have to remember a URL like podfeed.com/blog/category/security-bits. That's a lot of unnecessary glop for you to memorize, right? The buttons mean you don't have to worry your pretty little heads about it. I added a red button to my Tiny Mac Tips category on the homepage of podfeed.com so you can get to it quite easily too. And in keeping with my everything good starts with podfeed.com, I went to my web server again and created a redirect to that long, gloppy, and unmemorable URL. So now you can get to all of the tips by going to podfeed.com/tinymactips. Right? Everything good starts with podfeed.com. Now you can get to all of the Tiny Mac Tips by that simple URL, or you can use the red button to get to Tiny Mac Tips. And once you're inside any of the Tiny Mac Tips, you can navigate forward and backwards to all of the posts. But you know what? There were still opportunities for improvement. The next problem to be solved was improving how you would know which tips are in each post. Maybe you remember that I talked about how to use your iPhone as a scanner to the Mac, but you don't remember which post had that tip. As it stood, you'd have to navigate to every single tip post and read the entire post, or at least scroll through looking at all the headings to find the tip about scanning with the iPhone. Now, I toyed with the idea of putting shortened versions of the tip headings into the name of each post, but that got really ungainly with some of the ones that have a lot of little tips. I decided that it would be a big improvement if you had a little index at the top of each post, where you could not only see which tips were within the post, but you could also click on the tips to jump right to the heading for that tip. In HTML and sort of with Markdown, you can create a special kind of link that takes you to a different position within a document rather than linking to some other page source. I learned how to make these links ages ago, but I hate doing it because it's tedious. But because I love you all so much, I decided to take on the challenge. Regular HTML links start with ahref equals, quote, some URL, and it's in little angle brackets. Where some URL is where you want the person to go. These are called anchor links, hence starting with A, and the href means hyperlink reference. Next, you put in a link title, which is the text the viewer will see on the page. Links need to be closed, which for anchor tags means following them with the /A. Putting it all together, there's a long thing, gloppy thing in the show notes. You can look at it if you want to. All right, that's great. But some URL takes you to another web page, not the new location on the same page. To stay on the same page, we need to use a jump link. It's pretty similar in formatting to a regular anchor link, but since you don't have a URL to send them to, you need another method to identify the location to which you want the link to jump. Since we want to identify that location, we give the location an ID, and then we link that ID as the hyperlink reference. So let's do it by example. In Tiny Mac Tips 9, one of the tips was about Quick Look. Right at the heading for the Quick Look tip, I created a jump link. So all it says is A space ID equals, quote, Quick Look, then /A. Again, I have to open and close that anchor link, but I don't have to put anything in between the opening and closing. I'm just marking a location with an ID, so it can be an empty space if you want. Now that I have a place to go to with an ID, I can put a link at the top of Tiny Mac Tips 9 that's a link to that ID. Now, instead of using a URL for the hyperlink, I put the ID I want to jump to with a hash mark in front of it to designate that this is an ID. As the link text, I chose to put the heading title so you'd know which one I was pointing to. I created a heading at the top of every Tiny Mac Tips post called Jump to Tips, and I placed all of the jump links right under it. Now at a glance, you can see what tips are in a particular post and jump directly to that specific tip. Now, the only possible downside I see to this is that now the top of every tip page is getting pretty long with links because you have the jump to tip section followed by the links to the previous pages. I think it's going to be okay because you can always jump past the list of previous tip pages by using the jump links to get to specific tips. Now, I'm sure at least some of you are thinking, well, this is all well and good, Allison, but how do I figure out which post has a specific tip I'm looking for? Do I have to go to each Tiny Mac Tips post and look at that fancy new index on each page? I'm glad you asked. I've been tracking my Tiny Mac Tips using a Notion database, thanks to Jill from the Northwoods for teaching me how, and it lets me publish a web page of the data for you to see for easy reference. On the category page where you can see all the Tiny Mac Tips posts, you'll see a link at the top to the table of tips with the post number and URL links to take you right to them. Now, the bottom line is that the Tiny Mac Tips have been really well received, and I'm pretty happy with the improvements I've made for you to be able to find them. You've now got the button at the homepage, you've got an easy-to-remember URL with podfeed.com/tinymactips. Every page has links to the tips within it and previous and next tip pages, and you've even got a table to find the tip you're seeking. Well, this week's hero is Mike Bromberek, who used the shiny new podfeed.com/donate option to throw me a tip. He thanked me for my tutorial on how to print holiday address labels directly from Apple Contacts. These instructions are very old. I mean, the screenshots are still aqua, and yet the process works nearly the same as they did so very long ago. The only bummer is you can't word wrap in the name field anymore with macOS Sequoia, but other than that, it made Mike happy enough to donate. Thank you so much, Mike. Well, it's that time of the week again. It's time for Chit Chat Across the Pond. This is episode number 803 for December 10th, 2024, and I'm your host, Allison Sheridan. And we're back with Adam Engst of Tidbits. How you doing today, Adam?
Fine, thank you. I got a new microphone, so we've actually managed to play with something and have it work for once, as opposed to all my old microphones, which were bugging the heck out of me.
Well, I was going to ask you exactly how much have I cost you so far between buying a new mic? You've had to buy a new. You've got a fancy new boom arm too, because you like to stand.
I do. I do like to stand and I like to move. So it says we're going to have to see if it actually works. What I need is actually the thing that like wraps around my my neck and kind of puts the microphone in front of me like that, so I can
get wild. Yeah,
but I'll try to stand
You're
still.
You're feeling so restrained. Have I made you buy any software?
I'm a high energy person. No, I have all the software.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
So.
Well, yeah, I don't think everybody knows in the background all the different mics that you tried. You had a blue. A Snowball?
Blue Yeti. I had a blue Yeti first. That just broke.
Right.
And then a blue Snowball. And I actually have a blue snowflake, which was a tiny little snowball, and that didn't work so well. And and then on your recommendation, I got this Audio Technica ATR
ATR 2100 something or other is what I recall.
I will say, when they called it a blue snowball or a blue Yeti, you remember what the name
That's
is.
true.
If you called an ATR 2100 XTR or something or other, no one remembers.
Well, actually, since that mic has been around for practically ever, so I do remember the name of it because it was one of my first mics, and I've recommended it to others. I've still got one of mine, so I brought it in. We did a bunch of experiments, and we decided that that's why we kept going back to the AirPods, though, that the sound wasn't great, but they were reliable. They worked every time. But now you're on a big boy microphone.
Yes, and the AirPods. Though the AirPods did keep working. That was the problem, is that they were continually functional. I mean, and I have to say, I've been using the AirPods Pro more and more because of the noise canceling.
Okay.
Been to a couple of concerts where they were absolutely essential, and we were in a restaurant in Toronto recently last weekend, which. I have never been in a restaurant that was so loud. I actually took sound readings.
Really?
I have a decibel meter app on the phone, and it was averaging around 86 and was peaking to over 100 and like 108, something like that.
Was it like metal floors and
luckily,
ceilings or something?
It was very hard surfaces, and it was a very weird kind of building where it was very tall, so it was like 3 floors, and fairly narrow, and some big groups, and man, it was just so freaking loud. And Tanya and I both put in the AirPods Pro and put them on noise canceling, some level of noise canceling, and tried to hear Tristan across the table.
Did you end up doing the transparency mode, but with noise cancellation?
Adaptive, actually.
Okay.
So, in what I've sort of realized is as the interface gives you transparency, adaptive, and noise cancellation. And adaptive then has its own settings separately, quite a ways away in the interface, where you can do less noise, default, or more noise.
Huh.
And what that basically means, what my testing showed me anyway, is that essentially then you get 3 adaptive settings plus the 2, so it's basically 5 settings for how much noise cancellation you want. And so and it made a difference. I mean, like, you could put it on adaptive on more or less noise and really hear the difference in how much was getting through. And so it was kind of brilliant in that regard. What we really wanted, and I could not figure out if there's such a thing even exists, is wouldn't it be cool if like 3 people could have AirPods in and just talk
each other
over them,
like make a little loop,
right? Right, just in person, like, so everything else is being canceled. Like no other sound is getting through. It may just not work because of you're making your own noise, and so you can kind of hear yourself, but who knows? It just seemed like something that should be possible.
It does, yeah. Don't put it past them. I really wish the AirPods Pro would stay in my ear. They just ooze out fairly quickly, so enough to be annoying.
Yeah.
Steve's, it's just like he looks at a pair of earbuds and they just go boink and pop out of his ears. None of them fit in him.
Well. And the different tips made a big difference for us.
Man, I tried different tips. I tried third-party tips. I tried everything I could find, and they just didn't work for me. But then we got the Beats Fit Pro that have that little phalange thing that kind of curls inside your ear, and that made the difference. So we both wear those. And they do noise cancellation, but they don't have any of the new tricky stuff, so not quite going. But that's not actually the subject of the day.
No, it's not. Completely different topic.
Last week on the show, Pat Dengler came on and told a story. She's a certified Apple consultant, and she told a story of a neighbor who got scammed recently. And it was, just this close to losing $30,000. It was a really horrible story, and Pat saved her just in time.
Yeah.
But you got an email or something from a Tidbits reader in a slight panic, you said, about something that happened to them. And I thought your analysis of how you went through showing why this was not something that was terrible was really interesting. I thought maybe we could talk about that today.
Yeah. So, I sort of, in some sense, I kind of hate to be writing about this stuff because like scams are kind of horrible. Like they're not
Yeah.
fun in that regard. This one proved a little bit more so. But just to set some background, the reason why I'm kind of feeling a little scam heavy right now is another person who's sort of somewhat connected to Tibbets had gotten a copyright infringement scam where they were told that they had to they were using some image without permission, and they had to put an
acknowledgement or something.
Attribution on it, sorry, lost the word. They had to attribute it and put a link in. And it used DMCA language and blah blah blah. And what was interesting about it is that this image probably was being used without permission. May have been from Pexels or one of the places that claims that all the images are licensed, but maybe not. But it was in some sense really easy, right? Because you could just I'll put the attribution on and the link, and now this will all go away as a problem. Of course, what it is in fact a scam to get SEO ranking improved for some scammy site that you're linking to from your legitimate site.
Oh, that's genius.
Yes. And the email message that came with that was in fact really hard to identify as a scam, because it came from, a legitimate sounding person at a legitimate sounding law firm. It wasn't written badly. It sounded like lawyer speak, all those kinds of things. And so that one required, much more investigation of the actual lawyer and the law firm and things like that to prove that it was How
did your friend find figure out that it was a scam?
Well, so I was actually doing it for her, but basically, among other things, we looked at the State Bar Association. The address of the law firm was in Arizona, and we looked at the State Bar Association. No lawyer by that name, no law firm by that name. And when you looked up the address in Google Maps, which it was on the 4th floor supposedly, you looked up the address, and it's this one story Adobe building.
But what made you suspicious in the first place, though?
And this was where it was a little hard. One is it was calling for all sorts of DMC. It was using the DMCA. It was talking about the you're in violation of the DMCA, which stands for the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And that's one of those blah, 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 blah acronyms that people hear and just kind of panic. But in reality, all the DMCA can be used for is takedown notices.
Oh.
So if someone has your your copyrighted stuff on their site, you can issue a DMC takedown notice, which has to have very specific language and all that sort of stuff, and they have to take it down. That's or you can lawyers get involved very quickly, but it's only takedown. You can't use DMCA to ask for attribution or links or anything like that.
How did you know that?
Nor can you use the DMCA to basically require payment. So the other kind of copyright infringements, not really scam, maybe it's sort of a scam, but it's kind of real, is there's companies that go out and look for images that are being used without permission and then basically bill the websites that have used them. And it's sketchy, but it's not actually a scam. Assuming that the image is in fact being used without permission.
And assuming they own the rights to it.
And they own the rights to it. Yeah. It does happen. Again, often a lawyer can get them to go away because often they're trying. The scam part of it is they're often trying to charge too much or use all sorts of techniques that really are not quite legal. But nonetheless, it is real. There are companies that do this.
Well, I think it's important to talk about these though to keep people alert to thinking about these things. And maybe you won't get hit with this one, but maybe you get hit with something else where it just makes you go, let me do a little bit of investigation before I freak out.
So the first thing that I did that actually, in essence, revealed that this one was a scam pretty quickly was I searched on more than just like the company name. Because, and to be clear, the website, there was a full website for this law firm.
Oh, really?
With bios for all of the lawyers and, lawyerly sounding pages and all that kind of stuff. They had information about various things. Very simple kind of site to fake these days.
Yeah.
And so on a very quick, you clicked through, like it all matched up, like it looked real enough. But if you did a little bit more searching, what you found very quickly was this company name and lawyer name had been used multiple times.
Okay.
And other people had discovered it was a scam and written about it.
Okay.
So if you searched on more than just like the name of the company or more than just the name of the lawyer, if you like searched on them together, or you searched on the whole company's address, all the search engines would then pick up the fact that this other people had written about this scam.
Okay.
So doing a little bit more detailed searching would get you that far on this one. But then, again, what if you were the first person?
Right.
And that's where I was like, hey, go to the State Bar Association, do a Google Maps search on the address. Wow. Does it look right? Could it? Because Google Maps tells you what businesses are at an address.
Right.
So, and then there were businesses at the address they gave, but they were clearly not law firms.
I wonder whether you could have looked it up in Dun & Bradstreet. That's one of the ways I look for, like, is a company, maybe even a legitimate company, but are they a U.S. company? You can see where they're located.
Yeah. And the problem with this was, like, when you looked at the company name, it was something like, I don't know, Commonwealth Law Services or something like that. I forgot. Commonwealth Legal Services. It was such a generic name that you would find other firms with very similar sounding names in other places. So again, you had to kind of look past the really simple stuff. And then when you look again, once you'd realize that it was a scam, like all of, if you did, there's this wonderful, do you know about TinEye? TINEYE?
No.
It's an image search engine.
How do you spell it again?
So you can feed TinEye, like an eyeball. TINEYE. And so you can feed TinEye an image, and it will tell you where the image is located.
Oh.
Anywhere else on the web. It's a reverse image search engine. And so I fed it the headshot of the lawyer.
Oh.
And all the results came back with file names of like generated.photos, basically showing that it was AI generated. And so if you do a legitimate search, it'll actually, like if you search on your picture or something like that, it'll probably find some legitimate things. So it's one of those things you can prove, like, this wasn't a real person.
Wow, that's, God, you're really clever. Yeah. But I like this because you're giving us more generic tools for figuring this out than this specific kind of a scam.
And what normally with phishing, they're not very well written, and they're not very good. And the reason for that is somewhat intentional. They don't want people who are paying close attention and are super, alert and all that. They want people who are like, oh no, like I better do what this thing tells me.
Right.
Because if once you start looking, it's always going to fall apart at some point. And so they actually would prefer to find people who are like, if you're gonna figure out the scam right away, they don't want to talk to you. They're just wasting their time at that point. Okay. So normal phishing is often like that. We'll get to the one that I talked about in this most recent article too, but the other ones that I've been seeing a ton of recently are PayPal and DocuSign spam.
Oh, I've heard of the DocuSign one. Yeah, I think Bert talked about it.
The problems with both of them is they come from PayPal and DocuSign.
Oh.
So they're real email. They're not fake email. They're not forged. But you can send an invoice. You can set up a PayPal account, apparently very easily, I guess. I don't know. I mean, they're doing it. And then you can send someone an invoice.
Okay.
And if you're someone like me and you get an invoice from, Mac Store or, Apple Store or something like that, you look twice at it because I do buy stuff from Apple,
I might have bought some stuff
that's
too.
That's funny. Just, every now and then you buy something from Apple. And so the point being, though, that the only thing that is quote unquote wrong with these is that you're being billed for something that is completely fake.
Right.
They have semi-real names, and it's PayPal's true invoice message. It's being sent through PayPal. So you actually, and PayPal even has a link. Report this as a scam. and you can click the link. And if you're the first person, then it will thank you for reporting it. And if you're not the first person, you will get a message saying this invoice is no longer available because it was fake.
Okay, so and you send that to PayPal or to DocuSign or whoever?
Well, that's following the link. I'm not sure about DocuSign. With PayPal, there's also an address, phishing, PHISCHING, phishing at paypal.com. And I always forward all these things to PayPal as well.
Probably not.
Because I figure it's just a little bit
I don't think there's a C in phishing, but.
Yeah, PHISH.
There we go. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's not the F fish, it's the PH
right,
fish.
Right.
So.
Okay, so.
But so.
That's the other one.
It just keeps going. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's switch gears and talk about the one that you got from a Tidbits reader.
The one that just happened, right? The one that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is turning into a trend.
Yeah.
So this one, the Tidbits reader in question is older. He's retired, and like those of us who are getting on there, we know more and more people who have died. So obituaries become a little bit more common for something that we might look at. And he was searching, I think, for a neighbor who had died's obituary.
Okay.
I think the guy might have been named Chris Gamble, to judge from the search results. And so he finds, Chris Gamble obituaries and he's on his iPhone, and he taps one, and he immediately starts, his iPhone kind of blows up with these like, your iPhone has been infected, quick tap this to get a cleaner app, or use a VPN for protection, that kind of thing. And he just freaks, basically. Right. And that's when he contacted me. Because he was like, what is going on here? Actually, I take back, it wasn't when he contacted me. About 10 minutes later, he gets email from 1Password, totally legitimate email, which he confirms with 1Password support, basically saying that that a device has logged into your 1Password account.
Oh, geez.
And this is too close in time.
Right.
And so he's really worried that, oh my gosh, they just told me my iPhone was hacked, and now I've got a 1Password. Someone logged into my 1Password account, and 1Password support was very good, and they told him that it is a legitimate message. This is 1Password thing is not fake in any way. But that was when he contacted me.
You said he closed Safari immediately after seeing these pop-ups. So at first he was like, okay, that's probably not real. But then the other thing happens and he's thinking, well, wait a minute, what's going on here?
And what I don't know, and I'm not sure he remembers, he was moving quickly, et cetera, is how he closed Safari. So if you force quit Safari and then bring it back up for any reason, it's conceivable that could trigger the 1Password message, because it's sort of like has to reconnect to the 1Password site. The extension, the 1Password extension does. Is the theory. And there's a number of other things that can kind of do this too. Like if you change your IP number or change networks, you've got a new IP number and suddenly 1Password's like, I'm not sure this is a good idea. I need to reconnect. I'm going to reconnect, but then send the message saying that I did this.
But doing that doesn't always trigger that message. Just sometimes.
No, it doesn't always do. It's when I looked into it, like there's a collection of 5 or 6 things that can trigger that message, but they do not generally. It's more that if you've gotten one of those messages and didn't do something yourself, that's probably why.
Okay.
But it's not a common thing for people to have this message show up spuriously.
All right. So that was just a coincidence. But you also looked into the IP.
Coincidence. Yeah, coincidence, but certainly related. But so yeah, the first thing was it said, 1Password said, hey, your 1Password extension at this IP address just connected.
Okay.
And so the first thing I had him check is there's a website called whatsmyip.com. And just a very quick and easy way to figure out what other sites on the internet see your IP address as.
Right.
Because remember, your IP address is usually going to be the IP of your router.
Right.
not what your Mac says. So it's not usually helpful to try to look it up on your Mac. So you want to look at, you want a website to say, this is what I'm seeing coming from
Right.
you.
So, by the way, that's a very memorable URL, and that's awesome. But I prefer IP chicken. It's the same thing. It's got a chicken on it.
It's hard to go wrong with
exactly.
chicken, I must admit.
Chicken's never wrong. Okay, so you were able to match up. He saw that IP address from what'smyip.com, the same IP address. So if it's coming from within the house.
Well, yeah. So that's the problem, right? So on the one hand, good news. It's not, someone out on the internet who's hacked into your 1Password account. Like that is good news. Because if it was not coming from within the house, then you've got bigger problems because someone really has got your password. Right. But so, yeah, right. It's coming from the house. But of course, it's, that'll be the same IP address for his Mac and for his iPhone and for everything, because it's, again, probably his router that's actually producing the IP address that's being reported. So that was thing one. So I'm like, okay, well, good news that it's not someone out on the internet, that's hacked in. But bad news that, okay, like is it conceivable that someone hasn't, that some malware, because it's obviously not you as a person, that some malware has somehow managed to hack into your 1Password account and trigger this message. And that's where, nothing is impossible. Like, cannot 100% guarantee that this did not happen. However, the way 1Password works is you have an account password, and that's your kind of your master password. And that's what, like if you enter your password after you've restarted your Mac, for instance, you'll have to enter that account password. But when you set up a new device, you have a secret key as well.
Right.
And the secret key is not quite random because it actually has some stuff at the beginning that I know that's always the same or identifies in different ways. And then it's got a whole bunch of random stuff.
Right.
And so what 1Password does to make its encryption key is it combines your account password, which you've selected and you've made, with this random secret key.
And that's one of the big distinctions between 1Password and LastPass, at least around the time that LastPass was getting hacked every couple of minutes.
Yeah. I was gonna say, who knows what LastPass does anymore? Because I and everyone else I know immediately got off.
Right, so. Exactly. But that was one of the extra layers of security. Even if your 1Password got compromised, they have to have the secret key to mash together with it.
Yep, precisely. And that secret key is a pretty, it's a pretty long set of digits and numbers and things like that, letters and characters. So that really does massively increase the security. So the secret key is in fact stored locally. That's how, once you've entered it, you don't have to enter it again on a device. So again, it is 99.99999% sure that 1Password was not compromised.
Right.
But I cannot 100% guarantee it because it's, the information is all present in the right place at the right time. It's just that, oh boy, would Apple's overall security have to be compromised for your device's overall security would have to be compromised for this to become a real problem.
Right.
And so, like, if you're, a retired guy in the Bay Area, you're probably not a high enough value target for anyone who might have that level of tech.
Yeah.
Right? That's the we're going after, we're a repressive government and we want to get the leader of the opposition.
Right.
That's the kind of tech you use on those people.
Okay.
The exploits that you get to use once, because once it's used, Apple will figure it out and block it from then on.
So they wouldn't waste that on me, for example.
Not a chance. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because there is this sort of, it used to be saying back in the old days, people used to say, oh, I'm not that interesting. No one would ever bother hacking me. Well, that's true at the very high level now.
Right.
No one's going to waste one of those,
once in a lifetime
$1 million exploits. And right. I mean, they do. And basically, if you find one, if you're a security researcher and you find one of these things, if you're ethically challenged, yeah, you can sell it for $1 million.
Yeah.
there are people that they will pay that pretty happily. And that's why Apple actually and most other companies pay bug bounties, security bounties, because they're not going to pay $1 million, but they want to make sure that people are like, well, geez, I can get $1 million or I can get nothing. Like
million's looking pretty good.
Apple does pay. Yeah, $1 million's looking pretty good, but nonetheless, the where I was going with this, but most security problems are now automated, right? They're bots, they're script kiddies, it's stuff that you're not targeted personally. And so, yeah, you are interesting enough to be targeted by a bot.
Right.
And so that's why we all get phishing attacks all the time and spam and things like that, because it's easy. Why wouldn't you spread this phishing attack, across a few million people? Because you only need to get one for it to be worth doing to 1 million people.
And Bert has been explained to us that there's now basically malware as a service, so you don't have to write your own malware. You just buy some. So let's switch gears and talk about the Obituary site he was on. What did you learn about that?
Yeah, so that was really kind of interesting. So. Well, first of all, it was just a sloppily built WordPress site. I have a little Chrome extension called Built With, which reveals what technology is behind the site.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. And because all these sites have to, they have to, just in what they do, what they promote, you can usually get telltale stuff. So Built With is kind of fun to look. And it was more that I was just trying to see how real was this site, and it was pretty clearly not real. It was a simple WordPress site that had been spun up on November 13th because all the posts were dated November 13th, and they were undoubtedly AI written obituaries. And because a number of them said, so and so passed away, insert date here.
Okay. But those are going to get better.
And the one that. Well, they're in some sense they're fine already because obituaries are a style, like they all sound the same. Like I could have read any one of these except for the insert date here and not thought twice about it.
Okay.
They kind of went on, frankly. Like, okay, we get it. Respected member of the community, moving along.
Survived by.
Yes. And so in the particular one that my friend found, it was actually a very easy giveaway because the title was, Chris Gamble passed away. And then, I don't know, as soon as you got into the body of it, was a guy named Alex Brodsky. So, it didn't even manage to match up the title and the body in that one. But there were others on the site that were properly matched, and the other slight giveaway there was they had ads for gambling sites on it.
Nice.
So it was pretty clearly a scam site, but that wasn't the interesting part because that one really was you could figure out this is fake pretty quickly. What was interesting is if you went to it from an iPhone and only an iPhone, if you didn't hit it on a computer, it didn't trigger all this stuff. Then all of these pop-ups would start appearing, like where it would redirect you to another page that would, have like, 44 viruses found, and show up something, pop up with things like, clean them or something. And then when my friend panicked at that point, but I'm fairly comfortable that Apple iOS is not vulnerable to any kind of, malware that's going to exist on these kind of sites,
right?
That you can display stuff, but you can't actually do anything to iOS. iOS is too good for that. Again, if you have the exploit that can break iOS by visiting a site, you're selling it for $1 million. You're not using it on obituary scam sites.
On a poorly written WordPress site for obituaries.
Yep. Not wasting the silver bullet on those. So I just kept going to the site repeatedly, and until I'd collected, I don't know, like 9 different examples of these alerts.
Yeah, I'm noticing that. So he's got screenshots in his wonderfully written article, and every one of them looks different. Yeah. They're not the same alert each time. Some of them have the system settings logo in them. Some are just badly drawn. Some of them look like a classic alert. It's really interesting that they're so different. And this is the same website over and over again, or different websites?
Yep. Those are, well,
they have different URLs in them.
So it's different websites, but it's all triggered from the same source obituary site. So basically, you go to the source obituary site, and when it detects you're on an iPhone, it redirects you to one of these other sites.
Oh, wow.
And then if you tap one of their, basically you tap anything more or less, because they'll put up dialogue saying allow or cancel or, whatever they're doing, whatever makes sense for this particular alert. Whatever you tap, it will take you to the App Store.
Oh.
And load a VPN app or some kind of system cleaner app or something promising to protect you from bad stuff on the iPhone.
Oh,
and these are real apps.
Interesting. Well, yeah, are they real apps? What do those real apps do? Did you install any of them?
So as I said, I'm foolhardy enough to load malicious websites. I'm not foolhardy enough to load malicious apps. Because once you've allowed, an app obviously, in theory, can't do much because it's been sandboxed or whatever. Mm-hmm. But VPN apps,
they install profiles.
Install profiles.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not going there.
I was trying to think, could I do it with an old iPhone that I'm logged out of iCloud? But you can't. You can't install something from the App Store without being logged into an iCloud account.
You need a full test account and everything. And again, like I just do this on TV. I'm not a real security expert. So
you put screenshots of some of the apps that came up in VisiGuard, VPN, Purely Cleaner, VPN Lumos. I'm wondering, some of these have, well, I guess they're in the low tens of reviews.
So reviews can be purchased, so that doesn't mean
much.
And so
what is 13,000?
There's whole swaths of sites, products on Amazon, which have just, vast amounts of reviews because I just purchased reviews. So what was interesting is one or two of the apps was very, very new. Like it was like, I don't know, 1.0 version 1.0.1. Others have been around for years. And the problem is I don't know. I don't know if they obviously must do enough to have gotten past Apple's basic vetting.
Right.
And so I doubt they're, hugely problematic in that regard, because got past Apple. And I can't quite, I went through the app review guidelines and I couldn't quite determine if it's against Apple's guidelines to promote your app with spam.
Oh, like how you got there.
Right. Like you can't do anything like that within Apple's world, but I couldn't quite, there's some wording in there that suggests you can't, do anything fraudulent to direct people to the app. But again, and these companies, if they're real companies, could just say, well, we don't know. I have no idea how our link got into that scam,
Right.
So that's why I didn't automatically say, these are evil apps that you should be very careful about.
Yeah. I get a sketchy ick feeling looking at them though.
Don't you? They are not like, these are not, companies you've ever heard of or, anything else. And many of these, there's not a lot you can clean on the iPhone.
Right.
So the concept of a cleaner app.
Yeah. I find it odd to believe that would be allowed on iOS.
Yeah. So interestingly, you cannot report apps using the App Store unless you've purchased them. So I actually am still trying to figure out how to get this. I have quote unquote reported it, but I'm trying to figure out a better way to say, I think these apps are scams.
Yeah.
Look at them again. And because the automated method just won't work for me unless I'm willing to download them, which I prefer not to even clutter my history with them, put it that way.
Right.
Plus, and I'm working through the basic, a really simple form where I want to say, look, no, here's the background of why I think these things are scams, not like I'm going to click, report a problem and, I think it's fraudulent and then not be able to say anything in detail.
Yeah, I'm looking at Purely Cleaner, only has 1 rating, but it's got 4 stars for that 1 rating. But what they promise to do is allow you to see things like duplicate photos and duplicate videos. And that's something you can do with apps from the App Store.
Yep.
I've got one that does that.
Yep.
Lets you see a bunch of images and you can pick which one's the one you want to keep. But it also has merge duplicate contacts. And I don't remember being allowed to do that with anything.
Might be again, you can request like busy contacts and the like would request access to your contacts, and it can do that
from iOS. Or is that Mac OS?
For sure, but I wouldn't be entirely surprised.
But I don't think that's a Mac App Store app.
Once you have read-write access, there's an iOS app, I think.
Okay.
So Card Hop certainly from the fantastic Flexibits people,
right?
But if you can read and you can write, you can probably merge. So it will probably have to ask for all those permissions, but that would seem, you would probably grant them if you got this app.
Okay. Oh yeah, Card Hop is in the App Store. Okay. Huh.
Yeah. So, the question is though, is it somehow exfiltrating all this data? Yes, you've given me access to all your contacts. Now I have all your contacts, and I'm going to send that off to my server in some backwater country.
Right. New people to scam. So what do you see as the lessons to take away from all of this? I mean, you did a lot of digging that people wouldn't go that far.
I mean, I think a big one is be careful of obituary sites, unfortunately, because even legitimate ones, a lot of people have the same names, right?
Okay.
You search on, a name obituary, you're going to find a lot of people on a totally legitimate site, legacy.com or whatever. So, pay a little bit of attention to make sure you're on a legitimate site if you're looking at obituaries, because it's awfully easy to fake those. And Glenn Fleischman was editing my article, he was pointing out that there's actually, whole lots of scams, which don't require the same, even faking them. So, it's just, be careful when reading obituaries, and people are often not necessarily in the best state of mind when they're doing
I'm wondering whether you don't have to put the adjective obituary in front of sites. Be careful of sites.
Boy, it does seem that way these days. So that's thing one. Thing two is it's pretty unlikely that any website is going to be able to cause problems on an iPhone or an iPad.
Right.
Apple's security is pretty darn good. And partly they're constantly improving it. That's why we have all these stupid updates to install all the time, right? They were just, 18.1.1 was for 2 0-day vulnerabilities in JavaScript and WebKit. Right. So, those were bad website bugs. So, so always stay up to date with the security updates. They really are important. But that said, if you do end up in one of these sites, just, close the tab. You don't have to interact with it anyway. It can't do anything to you, so you don't have to be scared by it. You can just go, another one of those, and then you tap the tab button and you tap the X, and the tab goes away, and it's not a problem.
Okay.
So, I'm a big fan of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy because, don't panic is really good advice.
Well, and that is one of the things that they feed on is that panic, right? With the example of Pat's friend, where it's that urgency that they give you. If they're giving you an overwhelming amount of urgency that's making you super anxious, you should do everything possible to reverse that in your head and go, hang on, why is that urgent?
Yeah. Well, and also, to get back to that, that copyright infringement one, that completely freaks people out because it's you're being hit with a lawyer letter, right? That nothing ever good comes out of letters from lawyers, and so so that it's the same trigger that fight or flight response, and so I think the bigger picture story is, be aware that a lot of things are going to try to do this to you. And of course, it doesn't help that social media wants to do this in general, right? Social media wants engagement, and the best way to get engagement is to have things that make you crazy. So, general advice is always avoid social media like the plague that it is. but it's the same physiological response that all the social media sites are trying to trigger. That is what's causing these scams to be as effective as they are in some respects.
Right. I feel inadequate that I did so little when my mother-in-law called and said, "Allison, there's something weird on my screen. Can I share my screen with you?" And I looked at it and I was like, "Okay, I'm looking at this. It's got a red X in the upper right, not a red dot in the upper left." So Apple things are always red dots. As soon as you see a red X in the upper right, you know that's not for you. And she goes, "Oh, okay." And she closed it. And I said, "Okay, moving on. Good job." But I didn't go any further than that, right? I was just like, "Yep, she's fine."
Well, and part of why I've gotten into these is that, one, people are really falling for them. And actually, in both of these cases, the copyright infringement one, the PayPal DocuSign invoice stuff, this obituary, these were real people who are not dumb.
Right.
Like this is, this is not made up or super newbies who couldn't possibly have figured this out,
old
because
people
they
who don't know computers.
Nope. No, not at all. So they are real. And like, even after I posted the obituary one, I've gotten a couple of notes saying, "Yes, my wife just got this the other day."
Wow.
Thank you for, kind of resetting us, explaining what's going on here, because we just saw this.
Yeah.
And so it is out there. And, and again, like, I don't want to just be writing about this nonstop, but I'm always intrigued when there's a new type,
right.
And so it's like, oh, well, that's an interesting way to scam people. Like clever scammers. Exactly. Too bad you're, slime balls, because that's kind of clever.
Yeah, Bart and I talk about that often, where you're like, "Man, I kind of respect him for thinking of this. That's crazy, but okay, still hate you, but."
Yeah, right. Precisely. You're still a scumbag.
Right.
So yeah. And, and again, as I do feel that people who are older, I know a number of friends, getting into their, 70s and early 80s and stuff like that. And they're just not doing as well at identifying this stuff anymore. And, I said, it's the particular people I'm thinking of, and, I don't know how to do anything more other than just try to get out the information out there, so that hopefully it triggers when they run into one of these things, as opposed to them having to call me each time it does.
Yeah. I do think that one of the big values of doing this out to, like, in my case, this is a nerd community who's going to be listening to this, is not just to protect themselves. That is going to be an aspect of it, but to really preach that when your friend, relative, school teacher, whatever, calls you and says, "I see this thing," treat them with as much respect and honor as you can for having them called you. And make them feel good, like, "Wow, that's amazing. That's great. Thank you for checking in with me." Not, "Oh, you idiot. I can't believe you were going to fall for this." We can't ever do that.
No, not, and not at all, because this stuff isn't easy.
And it's going to get you and me eventually.
In particular.
Sooner, if not later.
No, I mean, I've only once, the closest I've ever come was, I had a friend of mine who passed away, and the right afterwards, like that. Oh no, yeah, it was like. Oh no, I'm sorry. It was a friend passed away, and then a woman who was his boss. Her account was hacked and used to send spam of some sort. I forget exactly, which I would never normally have in any way fallen for. I mean, I didn't do anything particular, but I read it and I was like, I almost replied and everything. But basically, because it was, again, so coincident in time that this guy had just died, and his boss, who I also knew, was sending mail that, somehow made me want to go do this thing. And it really was like oh my gosh, I almost fell for that.
Yeah.
I was that close. And because it pushed all the buttons. And so it doesn't take much, and people are moving faster than ever, not reading carefully. And, it's easy to miss these things.
I think we should close this out with Bart's tagline, which is stay patched so you stay secure.
Yep, it is absolutely true. Those security patches, they make a difference. And the problem is it's hard to say when, because you'll never know.
Yep.
You just won't have a problem.
Yep. Well, thanks for coming on and giving us the investigatory methods that you've been using too, because I think as we learn more about these, we need to have more tools in our tool belt to be able to figure it out. I never would have thought of looking at the Bar Association, for example.
And one thing I will actually also just mention as another quick thing to try, not that you should necessarily trust it implicitly and everything, but the AI chatbots are actually interesting ways to feed these things, because you can feed them an entire message and say, is this legitimate?
Oh, and it might give you some links to something that helps you investigate further.
Not so much. I mean, the links, if it's using Perplexity, for instance, which is more of a real search engine, ChatGPT is sort of notorious for doing bad links. It's more just that if what they're good at, right, is saying stuff like this.
Oh, okay. Right.
And so if stuff like this is like all of these other dubious things, they'll probably say nicely, you might want to look into this more deeply. Things like this have been used for scams in the past, and so it's just one new tool that we have. And when I pasted the copyright infringement stuff in, ChatGPT was like, all over.
Oh, okay.
That's probably a scam.
That's probably an LLM superpower, right? Have you seen this pattern of words?
Yeah.
Why, yes, I have. Right? That's what I do.
Yeah, so that's the one sort of new thing, and I don't quite want to, I don't want to say you should absolutely trust everything they say, because of course they're LLMs, they get stuff wrong. But as yet another data point in all of this, and it can be an easy one, right? Like you can literally just copy, paste. Is this real? No. Okay. Thank you. And then if you need more backup, you can. Most of the time, we don't need more. The only time we care is when you're being like me and you want to is that lawyer a real lawyer? Is that firm a real firm? Are they on the 4th floor? No, I don't think so.
Sounds like you had fun with that. Well, thanks again for coming on and telling us all about it, Adam.
You're welcome. Nice to be here.
Well, that's going to wind us up for this week. Did you know you can email me at allison@podfeet.com anytime you like? If you have questions or suggestions, just send it on over. Hey, we haven't had any dumb questions in a long time. I'm sure you have some dumb questions. We have dumb question music even, and we haven't had any, so send some on over. Those are fun to work with. Remember, everything good starts with podfeet.com. You can follow me on Mastodon at podfeet.com/Mastodon. If you want to listen to the podcast on YouTube, you can go to podfeet.com/YouTube. Want to find those Tiny Mac tips? Podfeet.com/Tiny Mac tips. If you want to join in the conversation, you can join our Slack community at podfeet.com/Slack. And there you can talk to me and all of the other lovely NosillaCastaways in there. You can support the show at podfeet.com/Patreon or with a one-time donation at podfeet.com/donate, like Mike. You can use Apple Pay or any credit card while you're there. Or you can use podfeet.com/PayPal. And if you want to join in the fun of the live show, wait until December 29th and then head on over to podfeet.com/live on Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time and join the friendly and enthusiastic NosillaCastaways. Thanks for listening and stay subscribed.